Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. So yes, there was more violence over the weekend, a fatal shooting that took place, resulting in a manhunt. Here's the story.
A manhunt is underway in New York City for whoever shot two women and a young girl in Times Square yesterday afternoon. Witnesses say it started with a dispute among a group of men when at least one of them pulled out a gun and began shooting. Here's the city's police commissioner.
How many kids have to be shot before we take this seriously? How many more kids do we need to be shot before we realize that bad policies have consequences? And we need action, and we need policies regarding laws to have consequences for the arrest.
So yeah, there's no doubt that this is a complete and total tragedy. 3 people lost their lives, one of them being a child, and there being a manhunt. But again, take a look at where this is taking place. Another violent action taking place in a deep blue city, in a Democrat-controlled area, with very strict gun control laws. We see this happening once again in an area where the Democrats being in charge demonize the police, try to make the police out to be criminals while celebrating criminals, where they go ahead and they promote domestic terrorist groups like Black Lives Matter, where they say that identity politics determines whether or not the law is applied to you. And then we wonder why there is such chaos. We wonder why there are so many hate crimes that take place. We wonder why there's so much intolerance and violence, because the Democrats go up there and they try to enact policies in order to, support the criminals. And no, criminality is not based off of skin color, but when you declare that it's Christmas for certain criminals because of skin color, then yes, they're going to go out there and feel like they have free reign to do whatever they want. And when you have strict gun control laws, all you've done is disarm victims. All you've done is taken the law-abiding and made them defenseless, helpless victims against the criminals who, by definition, do not obey the laws. And no amount of gun control is going to take the guns out of the hands of criminals. Why? Well, you got the open borders, so guns will flow across there as easily as drugs do at this particular point in time. But there's more to it than that. People can just make guns now, which is another reason why gun control doesn't work. It doesn't take much for someone to go out and buy a CNC machine, right? Hook it up to a computer and install the, program that goes with it. I want to make this gun. And then an hour to 3 hours later, they got the guns. All you're doing is disarming the law-abiding. So you're disarming the law-abiding, demonizing the police, and celebrating the criminals. Geez, why do you think all these things happen? Why do you think in deep blue cities you get gun violence, hate crimes, and mass arson and domestic terrorism? And what is really frustrating is people want to say this is bad policy, which it is bad policy, but it's not accidental. These results are not accidental. These results are by design. The left loves chaos. They create chaos. They create problems. And then they try to blame society at large for the problem in order for them to be able to go after their true goals, which is more power, more government, more authoritarianism, and less rights and freedom, an overthrow of the Constitution. But they got to make you desperate for it. That's why Democrat policies always end up in chaos, why you get all this violence in left-wing cities, is because it's by design so that they can set up a narrative in which to manipulate you. And the officer's right. You know what? We need, to actually enforce the laws. We need good policies. We need policies that make sense, and you're not going to get that from the Democrats. They love chaos. Okay, so speaking of violence, apparently violence is on the rise in Germany. Oh, and they have a narrative as to why. Here it is.
On Tuesday, Germany's interior minister made a disturbing announcement. Far-right crime in his country hit a record high last year with more than 23,000 incidents. A University of Oslo study of far-right terror attacks in Europe shows that over the past 30 years, Germany has had the most far-right terrorist incidents on the continent by far. They're worried that far-right groups will use frustration with repeated lockdowns and a botched vaccine rollout to stir up resentment toward the government and encourage sedition. All this comes at a time of major political transition. After 15 years of Angela Merkel's steadying influence at the helm, Germany will be electing a new chancellor come September.
Yes, that's right. The narrative is violence is rising because of far-right violence, far-right extremism. Of course, a left-wing country is trying to blame the far right. And of course, the report comes out from the government filled by a bunch of leftists. Do you think if the violence was actually far left, that they would be honest, going that it's their political side, their political ideology that's creating all the problems? Probably not, because like most leftists, they're completely and totally dishonest. But in going through and analyzing their claims that it's far-right extremism, far-right violence, what is considered far-right in Germany? I mean, that country is so left-wing, so insanely left. What is their definition of far-right? Well, if you actually go through and take a look at how Germany runs itself, its government, its policies, and all that, far right to them is center to mid-left in the United States. That's what it would be. So, you have to understand they're working under different definitions here when it comes to Germany as far as what constitutes far-right ideology. Far-right ideology in Germany is about center to mid-left here in the United States. I mean, that's how extreme they are over there in Germany, to the left. But they want to go off and say extremism. Well, they want to go off and talk about violence, and yet this is a country in which there are no gun rights. The rights of the people to own guns is virtually non-existent, and the ability to get a gun and the type of guns that you can get, very limited. All right, so again, far left country, strict gun control laws, rising violence. But what is it that they are considering to be violence here? I mean, I will admit that I don't go off and follow everything that's going on in Germany very well, but they also don't have the right to free speech. And they're saying that after 15 years of Angela Merkel at the head of the country, they're going to choose a new leader. That means you have had 15 years of failed policies, 15 years of saying open borders. And in the last decade, they've had, with their open borders, a bunch of extremists coming into the country, attacking the citizens of Germany, and the government saying, just suck it up and take it. We've seen this throughout Europe, where they've gone through and they promoted open borders. They wanted to show how tolerant and peaceful they are. And now there are certain portions of cities in which citizens of that country can't go to because violent extremists who have just taken advantage of the open borders, just came across, was imported into the country, have taken over those cities, declared them autonomous zones. Seems like a leftist think, and have banned people from being able to go there. And if you go there, or just walking around the city, there have been a lot of incidents of acid attacks, a lot of rapes, human trafficking, women being kidnapped and sold into sex servitude. I mean, we've seen this, and what has been the government's response? Suck it up and deal with it over there. And then you deal with the lockdowns that have gone on, and there's a lot of pent-up anger. And so people just taking to the streets and protesting, hey, which they don't have the right to do over there. Hey, we're tired of this. We're tired of being second class in our own country. We're tired of being open targets and you telling us there's nothing that can be done. Just roll over. It's the right of these groups coming into the country to attack us. Not everybody, but a large percentage of them that have made certain portions of the cities completely and totally unsafe. And the left, who runs, most of Europe, especially in Germany, refuse to take any action and actually go out there and tell people, hey, if you're concerned about your safety because of all the acid attacks, hey, if you're concerned about your daughter being kidnapped, raped, and sold as a sex slave in a human trafficking ring, you're a racist. You're intolerant. And if you speak out against it publicly, we'll arrest you. And then they want to go off and say far-right extremism, far-right violence. Well, what happens when you don't really have a democracy? The people are constantly ignored, and worse, the government is deliberately and purposely putting the people in danger. And anytime they speak out against it, they get arrested, for hate speech. They get arrested and thrown into jail. You've eliminated all the peaceful and democratic ways in which people can address their grievances with the government. And now they want to go, well, it's far right crimes, far right violence, and in a country where the far right doesn't even exist, or at least not by the definitions of the United States. But of course, the left, having dealt with, years of, openly supporting terrorists, the left wing here in the United States being extremist and violent, engaging in one act of domestic terrorism over another, they need to try and shift the narrative. So they want to be able to go off and say far right, far right, far right. Even when it's, among the far left of the left-wing groups that engage in violence, they try to find some way to try and claim it's a right wing. Because the Democrats, their whole marketing is to blame everybody else for that which the Democrats do themselves. Never take responsibility. Be the agents of chaos and blame your political opponents. There is absolutely zero honesty in the media. Zero. And they're going to try and convince you the opposite of reality is true. And they know a large portion, or that the vast majority of their audience is going to fall for it. The vast majority of their audience that are suckered into the fake news is going to believe it. Why? Because they've already proven that their audience is a bunch of mindless sheeps when they were able to convince them that transgenderism is a thing, that men can just become women spontaneously, and that women can become men spontaneously. The moment they were able to get people to ignore all science, all biology, all basic facts, that has been known as an absolute truth for millennia now. The moment they were able to get people to believe that gender is just a social construct, it doesn't exist, there's more than two genders, that's when they realized that it didn't matter what they say or do, the people that watch them will just believe it. They're mindless, helpless sheep. And then when they are called out, they just counterattack because, well, their audience is, dumbed down. And they keep getting crazier and crazier on the left with their claims because they're testing how well their attacks on the education system and dumbing down the public schools, along with the constant propaganda in the news, the censorship online, and Hollywood propaganda, how much that is, that has worked, how much that has been affected. And then, as they realize that they can get the vast majority of their audience to be suckered in and believe the nonsense, then they can start really targeting the people that say, hey, this is stupid, this has no facts, this is completely anti-science, or whatever the case may be on whatever issue. They just start going in and pressuring businesses, which have become a bunch of spineless cowards, and saying, hey, you either agree with this or at least don't speak out against it, or you'll be cut off from financial institutions. You'll be fired from your jobs. You won't be able to have any ability to communicate online whatsoever. All under the guise of tolerance and combating hate speech. So they can get a large portion of their audience, to be complete suckers and mindless sheeps, and everybody else, once they hit, that level, is just forced into compliance through violence or destroying their financial lives, going through the businesses. I mean, it's completely and utterly insane. And CNN, of all people, is trying to go out there and claim everybody else's fake news, such as what we see in this clip by Brian Stelter.
Is the USA suffering from a bad case of foxitis? And is it hurting America's pandemic recovery? That word, foxitis, It was coined by a lawyer defending one of the suspects in the pro-Trump riot. It's almost a Fox News made me do it kind of defense. Fox mania, the lawyer said. He said his client lost his job due to the pandemic and then watched Fox constantly for the next 6 months. Quote, he believed what was being fed to him. Indeed, many Fox viewers came away with a distinct impression that President Trump was robbed, that the election was rigged. But that is just one of the symptoms of Foxitis. Other possible symptoms are fear of the unknown, fear of a diversifying America, anger about cancel culture, but only when conservatives are affected, belief that Democrats and news outlets and tech firms are all radical villains. Perhaps one of the symptoms is even the ability to forget what you've seen with your own eyes. Fox mania leaves folks prone to conspiracy thinking.
Now that is just funny coming from CNN, a known propagandist. I mean, CNN, here's an outlet that has been caught admitting on camera with undercover journalists to lying to the American public, to, in their own words, running propaganda specifically to try and help the Democrat Party. You know, here's a group that has been caught time and time again, you know, admitting that they are not about truth and journalism, but they're about propaganda and narratives, and that they have a very, you know, real political agenda behind their reporting. Now, Fox News is not without their political bias, of course, and trying to say something that, you know, a lawyer came up with as a creative defense does not make something actually, you know, true. You know, a lawyer is just trying to, you know, throw anything up against the wall and see what sticks. And going through and trying to use the whole liberal argument, you know, Fox News, Fox Noise, and trying to claim that Fox News is the fake news propaganda outlet when the reverse is true. I mean, they're not 100% accurate. And, you know, when it gets to their opinion shows, some opinion shows on Fox News I agree with, some I don't. But their news outlet, their actual news segments that are actual journalists is very reliable. Unlike CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, New York Times, and all the rest of the left-wing outlets. I mean, every last one of them has been caught on undercover camera admitting to purposely and deliberately lying and misleading the public. So him going off and saying Foxitis and these constant attacks on Fox is just a joke at this particular point in time. It is just one of those things where, yeah, we get it. You're the fake news. You don't want to, you know, admit that you're the fake news. You know your audience is a bunch of mindless sheep that will eat up anything that you say. You know, but the problem isn't Fox News. The problem is CNN. And then he goes off and talks about, oh, hey, you know, a lot of people on Fox News think that Trump was robbed of the election. Well, yeah, because that's what the facts and the evidence actually show. We've covered that in very detail, how Biden's installation in the White House is unconstitutional and illegal. That, you know, and how the election was conducted in violation of the laws, along with a whole lot of other problems. You know, so they go off and they try to do this, you know, upside down world where CNN will go out there and call a conspiracy theory real. Because remember, it's CNN's audience that actually still believes in the Trump-Russia hoax. You know, the Democrats manufactured, we paid someone to make a bunch of claims without any evidence, circulated it around the government, and, you know, to pressure on the FBI, looking as they have multiple agencies giving them the same information from the same source, so they could claim, well, we were getting all types of information from all types of different people. You know, they violated the Woods procedure, and out of all of that, they couldn't find one shred of evidence to back up their claim. The most that they found was maybe Russia ran a few ads in 2016, spending what amounted to pocket change in the election, and running ads that were both pro-Trump and anti-Trump, pro-Hillary, anti-Hillary. And what's funny is the only ones who engaged with the Russian, advertisements on social media were the left with the pro-Hillary stuff or the anti-Trump stuff. No one on the right. They couldn't get anybody on the right to actually engage in their, crap. But, To this day, they believe the 2016 election was fraudulent without any evidence and that there was some sort of Trump-Russia conspiracy. And so with CNN, they run conspiracies and claim it's real news, claim it's fact and hard-hitting journalism. And then they take actual journalism and evidence-based facts and claim it to be conspiracy theories. Which is no surprise. After all, again, they've been caught on camera admitting they run propaganda on purpose in order to try and affect elections to benefit the Democrats. But the fact that he can go out there and keep a straight face as he goes off and tries to run this report, it's amazing. It's probably why he gets paid so much money. You ever notice how the big propagandists, how they're able to get the people on TV to do so much lying for them is because they just pay them a lot. Hey, okay, so you're telling me if I lie to the American people and I just run propaganda, lies, and fake news all the time, you're going to pay me $100,000 an episode, and I'm going to do 5 episodes a week. So I'm going to make, $500,000 a week. Hey, that is awesome. Or, $50,000 or whatever the amount is. They get paid lots and lots of money. You got billionaires paying people millions of dollars a year to lie to you. And then to attack and demonize anybody who exposes their lies with actual facts, data, and evidence. Isn't that interesting? And of course, the left is so stupid because they're mindless sheeps that their whole, yes, the evil rich guy, we're going to get him, we're going to tax the evil rich guy. And what do they support? Whatever the evil rich guy tells them to support. Everything that they believe in their whole tax the rich, let's go after the rich, let's redistribute wealth, what policies we think will do that, and what policies we think are only to benefit the rich. All that information is coming from the very people they claim to hate, using reverse psychology on the idiots who don't understand that. They go, you know what? Support the Democrats. They're really going to be damaging towards the rich and the 1%. The billionaires in control of the media outlets go, okay, we want something that's going to benefit us. Okay, let's write this legislation, this policy agenda, and submit it to the Democrats. Now, how can we get support? Oh, I know. Let's go out there on all the cable news networks and all the print journalism and on these big major websites and claim this policy is bad for the rich. Let's claim this policy is going to hurt the rich. And that if you really want to hurt the 1% for social justice, support this policy. There we go. And then the left goes out there and demands that policy, demands that policy be implemented. And then once it is, and the rich continue to get richer and the income gap continues to grow, the left is confused. Hey, I thought this was supposed to do something. I thought this was supposed to hurt the rich. How did the rich end up getting richer? And the poor getting poorer, losing income, losing ground. How did that happen? Well, it's because you're supporting everything that the rich tells you to support, and they're telling you to support that which only grows their own power and wealth while diminishing yours. And yet, when the Republicans come out, especially like President Trump, and institutes policies that actually help the middle class, actually help the economy, actually results in historic low unemployment, and for the first time in decades, incomes rising in actual terms, in actual value, and actual purchasing power starts to rise up. The rich go out there and go, man, this is really bad. The income gap is, starting to close a little bit. The middle class is making gains. They're going to be able to save up money and start their own businesses to compete against us. What do? Oh, I know. Let's say these policies that are helping the middle class are actually policies that help the rich at the middle class's expense. Yeah. And we'll spread that all across the cable news network and the print media and say that it's only for the 1%. And then they tell that to their followers, who then, just suck it all up, believing it because they're mindless sheep, and come out and go, man, we really hate this policy. We really hate that. The millionaires and the billionaires, knowing what mindless, helpless sheep they have turned their supporters into, I've realized that, very basic, simple reverse psychology, along with the standard lies, propaganda, fake news, fake fact checkers, and internet censorship, will allow them to manipulate their followers into supporting anything they want, and will be too stupid to, figure out what's going on, unable to comprehend why things keep getting worse for them after a policy is implemented that they support. Amazing. And of course, CNN is already trying to pre-write the post-pandemic narrative on what the economy is going to be like once the pandemic's over, and they have their idea of who's to credit for that and why. Take a look.
There are days when some states are even reporting zero COVID deaths. Of course, there are still dangers. Vaccination rates are slowing down. New variants are cropping up. Yet even with those caveats in mind, we can look at America and imagine life after COVID, and the forecast is mostly sunny. The most striking aspect of post-pandemic America is likely to be a big economic boom. Unlike the 2008 financial crisis, the pandemic paralysis will probably be followed by a sharp rebound. That's partly because of the differing nature of the crises, but largely because Washington has flooded the economy with money. So both businesses and individuals have cash to spend.
So there it is, CNN, yet again, trying to pre-write a narrative in order to try and give Democrats and Biden a victory or credit where credit is not due. They want to say it was due to government spending, all the stimulus packages that they had put out. Yeah, not so much. Not so much. And for instance, we see what happens when government engages in these big spending programs, these big entitlement programs, and what happens when government is big, massive, and controls so much. We see nothing but failed economies, high unemployment, high homelessness, and most of the population starving. Socialism and big government spending fails 100% of the time and has throughout the entire course of history. In fact, the bigger the government and the more the government controls spending, the worse off the population is. That's the way it's always been. And under capitalism, though, with small limited government, at least for most of American history, small limited government that had very little control or say over the economy and spent very little, we saw big success. We saw a prosperous nation and a nation that advanced human civilization more in under 250 years than what we had seen under the past 10,000 years of big authoritarian governments, of big government controlling everything. If government spending, which is what they're trying to say, government drives the economy, actually led to prosperity, explain Venezuela, explain Cuba, explain all the countries that tried this and failed throughout history. It's not the stimulus that is going to lead to the post-pandemic boom. It's the fact that we already had a booming economy under Trump when he cut taxes so that you got to keep more of your own money. The tax cuts that are still in place today, so that you're able to keep more of your money and spend it how you see fit. Because government, when they take money, they destroy it. It evaporates into the ether. They use it to take out more debt, which devalues the currency, so that it takes more money just to buy the same products and services, so that you have to work harder and harder every year just to maintain the same standard of living that you currently have. Right? So it's the tax cuts, but it was also the deregulations, getting government out of the way of business, out of the way of entrepreneurship, eliminating the protectionist policies that the Democrats have created for their big mega business donors. It was Trump that led to, historic low unemployment, a booming economy, a rise in entrepreneurship and business, and then the pandemic hit. And the pandemic hit, and of course, the scare that came along with that. What happened? Well, the policies, in place were still effective. The policies in place, still leads to a booming economy. But it was only the government artificially forcing businesses to shut down that led to a contraction in the economy, unemployment to go back up, and, damage to, our financial lives at the moment. It was the government coming in and go, hey, you must shut down your business. You must close your doors. You cannot, engage in business. Unless, of course, you're an essential business. And what is an essential business? Only left-wing businesses, only far leftist businesses and services. Only those who donated heavily to the left. Well, they got declared essential, so they got to stay open. But if you were a business that openly supported conservatives, you were declared non-essential and forced to shut down. Which is also one of those reasons why so many corporations have gone further and further left and have gone towards enforcing tyrannical left-wing policies, is because they wanted to be able to be declared essential or maintain the ability to keep their doors open and be able to continue to offer products and services and make money. It's one of those things where, geez, if we support the left, we get to continue making money. If we oppose the left, they're going to force us to shut down and close our doors because pandemic. But as the pandemic is ending, what's happening? The lockdowns are ending. The government coming in and saying, hey, you cannot be open during this time is over. So businesses are opening back up. People are going back to work. And the left wants to say, well, it's because of big government spending. No, it's because the economy was already in a position to boom and was booming until you forced them to shut down through forced government action. So everything was already in place for the booming economy. And we already had a booming economy. But they don't want to go off and talk about that, because then they would have to go off and give credit where credit is due. President Trump, his tax cuts, his deregulations. They can't have that. So they have to go off and create a narrative. And the narrative is big government spending. And that government is driving the engine of the economy. And if they can convince you of that, which, as I've stated before, then they're being able to convince most of their audience that there's such a thing as transgenderism and that men can become women and women can become men. They know that their audience is mindless sheeps who will, just gobble up everything that they say. So if they can go out there and just pre-write the narrative that is government spending, their audience is going to go off and go, okay, government spending, it created a booming economy. That means government spending is good. Let's vote for more government spending. And let's face it, government spending is by and large the government funneling money, taxpayer money, to their donors, who, after they take a large percentage of that money, kicks back a little bit to Democrat campaigns. It's a money laundering operation. They want to be able to convince you that we need to grow government, increase government spending, increase welfare and entitlement programs, do all the things that have led to the collapse of every economy that has tried it. The destruction of countries like Venezuela that had tried that. They want to convince you that the most economically destructive policies are the benefit. And then when it all comes crashing down, when it all collapses, as you keep voting for more and more government spending because of this false narrative, what happens? They're going to say, well, it's because democracy. It's because, the Constitution just held us back. We must get rid of the Constitution. We must get rid of democracy. We must have an authoritarian or a government not elected by the people, but made up of so-called experts, the smartest of the smart, which will only be determined by the left, to dictate and rule over every aspect of our lives, to control every business and determine how much everybody can make. Yeah, they are purposely trying to go off and collapse society so that they can replace it with their left-wing utopia, which is, well, according to history, authoritarian dictatorships with starving poor people and just a very small few people in government having all the luxuries of life, while you are struggling just for enough food to eat. Yeah, that's what always happens under these left-wing policies. Okay. All right, so I think I'm going to go ahead and leave the show there. Thank you so much for tuning in. You know the drill. Share this. Hit like, comment, leave me ratings and reviews on the audio podcast. If this is your first time catching the show, don't forget to hit subscribe, which is just to say follow. It doesn't cost you anything. Thank you so much, and I will be back again soon.